Howdy folks, you're watching Deuce. This is 10 rounds of 5.56 ammunition that I loaded myself, perfectly for my AR15 collection here. Now, over 20 years ago, I sat down and set up a beautiful load with Reloader 15. The reason why I chose Reloader 15 powder was because it was available to me locally and always had been and was for almost 20 years. But as Bob Dylan says, times they are a-changin', and I can no longer find Reloader 15. I've not seen it in years locally. I can probably order online, but I don't want to be dependent on whatever random website is out there to get whatever specialty gunpowder I need. So this is my last full bottle of Reloader 15, and if you know anything about the shooter's world or the prepper's world, 2 is 1 and 1 is none, and I practically have no Reloader 15 left. But what I can find is this Hodgdon CFE 223. It seems to be less expensive than Reloader 15 per pound. Supposedly it's better at copper fouling or keeping your rifle from fouling the barrel, and it is less sensitive to temperature swings. Reloader 15 was also renowned for being less temperature sensitive than your average gunpowder. And CFE 223 is supposedly, told me by the experts, even better than Reloader 15 in that regard. So I can expect to shoot this in 100-degree weather in Tennessee or sub-freezing weather in Tennessee, and the bullet velocity should be relatively the same. Now, it was several weeks ago that I loaded up my test rounds here, so I've already moved on to 9mm. So let me go ahead and get my turret press out, which is what I use for 5.56, is a Lee turret press, not a progressive press, although this press could handle 5.56 if I wanted it to. And this old archaic press from Lee is what I use for most of my rifle rounds because it is the perfect balance between speed and accuracy and precision, which I guess, and price, by the way. Can't leave that out because I am a cheap bastard. A real quick and dirty explanation of how I reload, the steps I take, which I may or may not be able to leave these in here. Basically, you take an old case of 5.56, you spray some lube on it. I like the one shot there, and you decap it, which basically fixes all the blemishes on the piece of brass and pops out the primer, the old spent primer. And now you have a case that's completely reformed, almost back to factory, but it needs to be trimmed because cases tend to stretch, especially bottleneck cases like these that have the neck on the end that bottles down to a smaller bullet than the case body is. And you got to trim that. And I've got a very, very cheap, easy, super foolproof Lee trimmer right here that I can just go to town, trim it down to basically the same length as all my other pieces of brass. Is it perfect? No, not quite, but it is good enough. Then I take out the burrs and everything, and there are 1,000 different ways to do this. At this point, because these are 5.56 cartridges, a lot of the primer pockets have been crimped down, which means it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get a new primer in there. So you've got to clean out and ream these primer pockets. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean it out with this Lyman primer pocket press tool, whatever it's called. Ream it out, clean it out, and now she's good to go for a new primer. One of the few expensive items on my list here is this RCBS Chargemaster, actually Chargemaster Extreme. It's a very, very nice one. It's a mid-level. There's one even more extreme than this. And I've got a whole video on this. I'll put it up here and down below to link if you want to know more about this stuff. This is a game changer for rifle reloading, by the way. So I get my RCBS funnel with the 223 application, stick that on there, pour the measured amount of gunpowder into the funnel. It goes right down into the case, and then we go back over to the reloading press. You always want to keep your reloading press and your electronic scale on different surfaces, on different countertops, because all this rocking and rolling you're going to do while you're reloading is obviously going to mess up some of those weights. I use Hodgdon's own loading data center, which you can go to their website and find all the loading information that they offer, and it's free to use, which is awesome. And they had a range between 26 and 27.8 grains of powder of CFE 223. So that's what I utilized, although I did keep it below the maximum because I'm not interested in trying to get these bullets screaming down the range. I want it accurate and reliable. I made 3 rounds in each one of these powder loads with the exact same bullet, the exact same crimp, and the exact same overall length. And each setup had their own little note card and individual baggie to keep them all separated, and I could take notes later on. By the way, did you know you can actually buy on Amazon these Skillcraft pins? You remember these? Skillcraft, made by the blind for the military, for the government. They're just as awful as I remember. I'm using a D&T optics here, so let's go ahead and go to the maximum magnification. Let's go ahead and jump over to the left-hand top target. $29.58. $29.51. Is that accurate? Holy shit, look at that. Aha. I'm getting eaten alive out here. Ammo out of the sun. Okay, 3 rounds of 26 grains. We'll move on over to the top right hand side there. A little bit of shade, but also I have already hit that with an earlier shot, so let's just forget that happened. $29.43. It smells like Reloader 15. It really does. This new powder smells just like Reloader 15. Opened up a little bit. When you're on your bench range, always use these small 10 or 20 round mags. They're perfect for this. $3,032. Again, this is 27 grains. Nope. $3,053. $31.34. That's pretty hot. And it's right there in line with everything else. Okay. Not a big difference. $31.02. $31.06. At 26 grains at 50 yards, I got roughly a 1.3 inch group, which is not good at all. Your rifle might vary. You should all do your own ladder testing going up from minimum to maximum practically with your own rifle because every rifle is different. My rifle apparently hated 26 grains. Even though the accuracy was piss poor in my rifle, I'm still going to give you the detailed information because it may work great in yours. I got an average speed of 29.71 feet per second. All these are going to be in English units, nothing metric here. A deviation of 78 feet per second from the fastest to the slowest. And using a 55 grain bullet, that gives us an energy output of 1,078 foot-pounds of energy. I also forgot to mention the bullet I'm using here. It's a 55 grain full metal jacket boat tail bullet. They're basically shaped, they're pointed, and then they come in a little bit in the bottom, and they're shaped basically like that. But the real ones don't look all tarted. Moving up the ladder to 26.5 grains of CFE 223, I got this grouping right here, which if you go ahead and measure that out, that comes out at 0.53 inches, so just barely over 1 MOA. And that is fantastic accuracy for a rifle that really was never put together for a bench range accuracy style rifle. But the devil's in the details, so let's go ahead and go over those. We had an average speed of 29.57, so it's actually slightly slower for some reason than the 26 even. I don't know why, but that's what happened. The deviation between the fastest and slowest was only 10 feet per second, which means it's going to be very repeatable, and that gives us an energy of 1,068 foot-pounds of energy. Due to my inability to plan ahead, I ran out of targets and had to use the same target for both 27 and 27.5 grains. I also already used this target once, and I had one bullet hole right there. Let's ignore that sucker. I wish I could claim that this group here and that group of 3 there are their own different loadings, but they're not. Unfortunately, the top 3 are 27 grains and the bottom 3 there are 27.5. At roughly 0.73 inches, and the bottom 3, the 27.5 grain loading, is just a shade under 1 inch. We have an average speed of 3,025 feet per second with a deviation of 63, so not great there. That means that there could be a lot more flyers or things close to a flyer versus the deviation of 10 feet per second. And that gives us an energy of 1,117 foot-pounds of energy. And nearing the max recommended load, 27.5 grains here, 31.14. So that is the fastest by average. The only one up here that got above 3,100 feet per second. Deviation of 32 with an energy of 11, I can't read my writing. It's either 54 or 84. I think it's 84. As far as this exact rifle is concerned, with that weight and style bullet, 26 grains is flat out. I will never load that again for this particular rifle. It may work great in something else I own, but not in this thing. 26.5. That is an excellent result, something I'm definitely going to go through and do some more research on, because this is step 1 in a multi-step process, multiple trips to the range to really get this dialed in. 27 was not bad either. Was it slightly worse in deviation and in accuracy than the 26.5? Yes, but there could be somewhere in between 26.5 and 27 that is even more accurate in this rifle. But you start getting away from that accuracy when you hit the 27.5. So this particular rifle with this particular loadout, overall cartridge length and everything else combined, somewhere between 26.5 and 27 is probably going to be my sweet spot, my sweet zone, and I will probably kind of go up the ladder there between those two weights by tenths of grains to see what it really prefers. If it never shoots any better than this right here, I'm a happy deuce. One interesting observation I had between the load data that Hodgdon provides you versus the real world experience I had here was that they say that at 27.8 grains, which would be just a shade bit more powder than my max testing load, should give me a velocity with a 55 grain bullet of 33.29. As you can see, I maxed out or averaged out 31.14, which is quite a bit slower than their advertised 33 plus feet per second. The reason why there's a discrepancy between what I achieved in the real world versus what they say I should have is because of the barrel length. They are testing, along with most data centers here for reloaders, they're testing their 5.56 and 2.23 loads with a 24-inch barrel versus my 20-inch barrel. And those extra 4 inches would make a couple hundred feet per second difference with the 2.23 and 5.56 ammunition. I also need to mention that the barrel they're using for testing has a 1 in 12 twist rate versus my 1 in 9. Now, does that make any difference as far as the accuracy? It could. Could it make a difference in speed? Probably not. I don't think that's nearly as much of a speed difference or speed determinator as the length of barrel, which is pretty much king in determining how fast your bullet's going to go. While there will be further testing on the CFE 223 powder, I'm pretty much solidified for this particular rifle to keep it between 26.5 and 27 grains of powder. So I'm ready to go ahead and solidify that by putting it into my 5.56 composition book. I've got one for pretty much all the rifles, and there's 9mm as well, and rifle loads that I have, because I lose track of my loadings, and 5 years down the line, I've misplaced a book. The book's gotten wet and gotten destroyed, and I can keep these safe and sound, and they're very, very durable. So you can get these at Amazon. I've got a link down below that is super cheap, and you get a ton of these. So you can just mix and match and have a ton of different loading manuals that you've made yourself, your own personal loading manuals for your own personal rifle. As you can tell from the footage, I had a great time reloading with CCF 223, a great time shooting it at the range. It was a beautiful day to be outside, to get sweaty and hot in the 85 to 90 degree weather. Just a good time was had by all. It was safe, it was fun, it was mentally relaxing. It was like yoga for real men. Well guys, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a like and go subscribe. A lot more is on the way. If you have any comments, questions, show ideas, leave that down in the comments down below. I'll try to answer as many of those as possible. And as always, you guys have a great day. See ya.